Hello there and welcome to another edition of CLEARVIEW. This is our public enlightenment program on AIT. I have as guests on this week's edition of the program Dennis Emmanuel, a politician, Kaduna-based politician, based in Kaduna but does a lot of politics globally. We have him as guests because we are discussing issues not just relating to government but also to governance and governors. This week we shall be taking a look at why blossoming relationships among some politicians don't last. Then, state police, to be or not to be. We will later zero in on 3 states of Kaduna, Benue, and Taraba for some happenings in those territories. My guest is qualified to handle this, having been the media aide to 3 Kaduna state governors, starting with Ahmed Makarfi, Namadi Sambo, and late Patrick Yakowa. Dennis, you're welcome to CLEARVIEW. We'll be back after this break. Now, let's start this way. Not long ago, former President Olusegun Obasanjo said governors are living like emperors. That is to say, governors are living extravagant lifestyles at the detriment of the masses. You have been media aide to 3 governors, is that correct?
Oh, definitely. But you see, at times, when you hear comments from former President Obasanjo, it is better for us to accept these comments and analyze them properly. President Obasanjo is an experienced politician and an elder statesman. And therefore, anything coming from that quarters is not something that you just treat with kids' gloves. President Obasanjo has seen it all. So for him to say or emphasize that governors live like emperors, I think he may not be too far from the truth. It may not be generally that all governors are like that. But in the context of Nigeria, one can say that most governors live like emperors. And why will we say that? You see the litany of cars in the convoy of a governor. And then you begin to imagine why you have close to like 12 to 10 to 14 vehicles in the convoy of a governor. Now work that out simply. What it tells you is that the cost of maintaining these vehicles alone is enough to pay the salaries of people. Of course, you know that in Nigeria, there is always the actual cost of something and then the perceived cost, how it's supposed to be. And most of the times, the governors work with perceived cost. Perceived cost in the sense that we all know how much fuel is costing. But if you, for instance, go and check the running cost of these vehicles, you will find out that it's way, way, way out of the ordinary. Now you move away from that. The flamboyant lifestyles of this governor is another thing. We know that governors are engaged and involved in all sort of activities that may not be directly linked to governance. They may want to brand these as extracurricular activities, and this perhaps must be the reason that informed President Obasanjo to make such a statement.
Good. We are dedicating today's edition of the program to government, governance, and zeroing on the governors. Now, governance is progressive if there is continuity. I mean, this is coming from proponents of 2 terms, those who support the idea of 2 terms for governors. But then, some are saying a single term, possibly of 6 years, is okay. Based on your experience, having been in the government house for a long time, what will you advise? A single term of 6 years or 2 terms of 4 years?
They all have their merits and demerits. Okay. They all have their merits and demerits. Those who will support 2 terms of 4 years will always tell you that I am supporting this because there should be continuity, like you have said. 4 years will not be enough time for someone to be in office and perhaps put down his mind and execute them properly. And therefore, he needs another 4 years. We've heard some people who said they use the first 4 years to plan, to design, and then the second 4 years to begin to implement the things they're doing. This will be the argument for those who support this. They can equally further argue that when once a man comes into office, the first 1 or 2 years he will use to take stock. He will take stock of what his predecessor left behind, and then he will begin to put structures in place to begin his own activities. And before you realize what is happening, you and I should know, anyone who is in the business of politics in Nigeria will know one thing. If a politician has a term of 4 years, effectively when he has served 2 years in the office, it is assumed politically that he has served for 3 years. Because that you see, the moment you get to the 3rd year of any person who is in office, activities that have to do with development and thereabout will be whittled down. The man will begin to talk politics, like what we see today. Today, the government that we have in power, by May 29, would officially be 3 years in office. But you will agree with me that so far, everything that has to do with development is relegated to the back. What we hear this day, when you put on your television, when you pick up the newspapers, is politics, politics, politics. Because everybody who is occupying one position or the other today is interested in re-election. And therefore, the moment a politician has spent 2 years in office, politically he has spent 3. The moment he has spent 3 years in office, politically he has spent 4. Because the 3rd and 4th year, in most cases, is always developed and dedicated to politicking. This, perhaps, is a serious problem that has to do with those who support this issue of it's the double term of 4 years. But if you look at the argument on the other side, those who argue for a single term of 6 years, I want to believe that they really and sincerely and genuinely do have a point there. Because when once a man occupies an office, for instance, the office of the president, of course, he's not going to rule alone. He will have ministers, he will have members of boards, so many appointments that he has to make. These people that he has appointed into place, especially his immediate cabinet ministers, I will want you to understand that the ministers, in as much as they are responsible to the president, there are so many things that go around these things. Therefore, even if the president may not desire or willingly want to run for a second term, these ones can gather around and impress on him because of the juicy things they are enjoying in the office, because of the paraphernalia of office, the sirens and the respect and everything that goes with power. They may continue to impress on the principal to say, look, you must have to contest. And then it has an adverse effect on the man, because the man will sit down and probably want to allow things which normally he wouldn't have allowed to pass. He will allow them pass. People paint a picture of a situation where, for instance, someone has won an election to be a governor or, for instance, to be the president of a country. And then he stays in office for 2 years, upward of 3 years. And then his ministers or commissioners will come around, and then they will begin to talk. The man will not be able to call a spade because he knows the second term carrot will be dangled at him. The moment the second term carrot is dangled at him, we've heard or seen situations where people will tell the governors or presidents that, look, do you think when it is time to go out to the field to campaign, we are going to be campaigning with stories to tell the people? The electorate will not listen to stories. The electorate will need you to come out with something, and that is really very bad. That's a lesson for another day, because the electorate also have their problem. But the issue is, if you have double term of 4 years, this is the problem you are faced with. But if it is a single term of 6 years, the principal that is in office can know that posterity will have a lot to say about him. If he fails to perform, he has just 6 years to do it. He does not owe anything to anybody. No one will come dangling the carrot of second term, which will make him reduce the way he's supposed to behave or the way he's supposed to react. You see a president or a governor electing people, and obviously the cabinet is not moving. Members of the cabinet, they do not deliver on the deliverables that they are supposed to do. They are not living up to expectation. But the president or the governor may not be able to dissolve cabinet. Why? Because the moment you dissolve cabinet, second term is there hanging. You're already creating enemies for yourself. But if you know that you have a single term to perform, a single term of 6 years, you will not care whose ox is God. What you want to do, you will know that posterity will tell the story about you, and it depends on the side of history that you want to belong to.
Yes. That brings me to the issue of state police. Some governors have been crying out that, look, these men of the Nigerian police are not answerable to governors.
Correct?
So they are totally in support of state police. But a school of thought is saying that state police eventually will be used as thugs for local politicians and even the governors. Where do you stand?
Well, everything has its own time. In Nigeria today, we may not be too ripe for that. I want to align with those who say we may not be too ripe for that. Why? Our thinking may not be too ripe for it. Inasmuch as we agree that it is important to have people who police you, who live within your community. Because what is existing today is you pick a policeman from Sokoto and then you send him to go and police in Port Harcourt. And then you carry from somebody from Port Harcourt and you take him to Katsina. And then you crisscross somebody from Lagos to any other part. The implication of this is it takes the man an average of 1 to 2 to 3 years to understand the terrain of where he's coming to police. And therefore crimes and every other thing will be taking place within that vicinity. Because he does not understand the workings of the place, it will take him a longer time to resolve crime. But if you have one who resides and who is an indigene of the place, he understands the locality, he knows the people there, he understands their thinking, he can understand and know certain people, he knows the character traits of people who are almost like himself, and therefore it might be a bit easier for him to work and operate and curb crime. But you will also want to look at the other argument, which is those in charge, the governors that these policemen will be answerable and responsible to, those ones who will be there, those ones who will sit at the helm of affairs, appropriating things, may end up, not doing the needful as when it ought to be. What do I mean by this? If we have a situation where we have state police, we have seen where governors have created vigilante groups, and these vigilante groups under different sorts of names. We know what these governors use them to do at the end of the day. At the end of the day, because they are answerable to the governor, because they are answerable to them, the word says, he that pays the piper dictates the tune. Yeah. So it is the governor that will determine the dance step of this police, if we have it that way. The governors will determine where they dance to. And the fear is, it could just be a tool in the hands of the governors to clamp down on opposition. You will hear issues of probably assassinations, you will hear issues of illegal incarcerations, you will hear all manner of things if we have this as it stands today. But I am not saying that we cannot have it. I'm only saying that as at this very time, Nigeria is not ripe for it.
Well, after that one now, there is this constant friction among politicians. Could be the deputy governor that has taken over from the governor. The relationship was very, very brilliant, flamboyant. Suddenly, it will become frosty. Or some politicians that will sing praises of governors to high heavens within a month or two. We have all these examples all over the whole place. For instance, in Kano, former governor Kwankwaso and Ganduje. What is going on now? If we leave governor and deputy, let us see some close allies, like in Kogi State.
Yes.
Dino Melaye versus Yahya Bello. What are the causes? Money?
Resources. Simply resources. Because you see, if we have to take the issues between the governors and the deputy, in Nigeria, it's very rare for you to see. I think the cases are cases that we can even count with our fingertips. It is always very rare for you to see a governor, after serving out its time, handing over to his deputy. I think we can pinpoint the states where this has happened. Kano State of recent is one of them. And then I think Shinkafi did that to somewhere in Zamfara also. And then one or two other states that these things have happened. At times you may look at it. The ones who have left office, who have become former governors, always want to believe that, you know, because I have handed over to you as my deputy, you are my boy, and therefore you should be answerable to me. But if you check like the case of Kogi State, Kogi, we all know that the relationship between these two people, Dino Melaya and Yaya Bello, at one time looked very, very beautiful.
When the going is smooth and good,
The Almighty God voted for Yaya Bello. May I have the honor now to also recognize, the youngest governor of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, intellectually mobile and sagacious, indomitable and indefatigable, powerful and enterprising, young but married. Jam your hands together for Yaya Bello. We are calling immediately for the resignation of the governor, and if the governor refuses to resign, we are going to mobilize our members in the House of Assembly to start an impeachment process against the governor.
That when a child lacks proper parental care and home upbringing, they constitute social menace in the society. And if the society did not take steps to check and correct such a child, they can turn into criminals.
Kogi West people are tired of the way and manner in which Senator Dino Melaye is representing at the national level.
But you have seen the utterances of Dino Melaye within the chambers of the National Assembly. And we also want to see, we have read that the Kogi State governor has many friends in Abuja in high places. And when Dino Melaye begins to make some statements that will appear as if it's affecting the friends of the Kogi governor in high places in Abuja, of course, Kogi governor is not going to take it kindly. And therefore, it will lead to some fracas between the two of them. What we are seeing playing itself out, one, resources. In Kaduna State, we have seen between El Rufai and Shehu Sani and Co. Some of us know they were campaigning together to make sure that they get PDP out of office. But you know, it is one thing to get someone out of office. It is one thing to share the booty equally. It is when you start to share political offices that problems come. Some want to be overbearing on the governors. And the governor, for God's sake, needs some space to also implement his programs.
You just mentioned that you were talking about Kaduna now. That reminds me of Governor Nasir El-Rufai. I see him as a very controversial figure. Well, even when he was FCT minister, now this issue of teachers, his relationship with the teachers, teachers were asked to face examination, teachers were sacked, teachers were recruited. How do you assess Nasir El-Rufai as governor of Kaduna State, most especially in the area of education?
Well, he has his own reasons for saying he wants to sack teachers. If you ask him on a good day, he will tell you he's doing the best for education. But we have seen situations where you start with school feeding program, and then since we are doing a general assessment of Governor El-Rufai's administration as regards education, you say you want to start school feeding program, and you are feeding children. At the end of the day, children sit on bare floor and probably, you know, do not have seats. I feel that is a misplaced priority. I feel you should first of all make the learning environment very conducive for the children, and then you can go on to implement other programs of school feeding and all of that. Away from that, Governor El-Rufai can also tell you that if I sacked teachers, I gave them an exam to write, and a lot of them could not score upward of 75%, as we are told, and therefore I had to flush them out. It is not a bad thing to want to upgrade the standard of education in your state as a governor. It is a very good thing for you to do. But the thing is, the way and manner in which you go about doing it is what people will want to question. I am of the opinion that if you want to sack people, when you took over office, you should at least create a platform. Learning is a continuous process. No one learns everything in the world until the day you enter the grave. No one can finish learning. And if we agree that learning is a continuous process, I feel that the governor should have created a platform to organize some sort of training and retraining for these people. If he had told people that, look, I sent all the teachers in batches to go to NUT or to go for further training, and when they finished training, they came back here and I administered a test and kept 75 as a pass mark, and these ones didn't pass, even after training, the story would have been sweeter to hear.
Right. I want us to quickly touch 3 governors. We just finished with one. Benue State. The spate of killings continues unabated, most especially in that state. Though we have killings in Zafara, Taraba,
Sure.
whatever. Is Governor Sam Otom helpless?
I think that is even the right word to use. The man appears helpless. Helpless in the sense that he has no direct control over the security apparatus of the state. Everybody knows that security of this country is the exclusive reserve of the president. He deploys the police, the IG reports to him directly, and therefore the governor is only bearing the name of the chief security officer of the state, but can do little or nothing when issues like this happen. Governor Tom, with all due respect to him, I think is a man in distress. Not just helpless, he's a man in distress. Lately, I have taken out time to watch the man critically when I see him on television, when these killings happen in his state. What you see or what you read on his face is a man that is in distress, a man that is in pain, a man that is troubled and disturbed and helpless because of what is happening within his territory. I want to believe that amongst the 36 governors that we have in Nigeria today, none is as helpless and as distressed as Governor Tom because of the obvious things that is going on in his state. And I want to also believe that the fact that he's helpless and distressed, it stems from the issue that he can do nothing. You know, when you sit down and you feel that something is happening within the territory, you feel you are in charge, and you can actually not do anything to curb it. You have to wait for a higher authority. You have to wait for a greater power to come and administer things in your state. It becomes very troubling.
All right, we have touched 2 states now, Benue and Kaduna.
Sure.
We are winding up the program now, which is CLEARVIEW. And let's get to Taraba. Former Defense Minister T.Y. Danjuma gave the army knocks over killings in that state. And that one even came after the Taraba governor, architect Darius Ishaku, has also given knocks to the Nigerian army. How do you react to this?
Well, they're in a better position to know more than us. General T.Y. Danjuma is a respected general in the Nigerian army, a man who I can say has seen it all, a man who does not talk except when very necessary. If you see the disposition of the man, all of us will agree that at times you do not even know that General T.Y. Danjuma is still in Nigeria. So it took us by shock when we heard T.Y. Danjuma make those statements that he made. They were very heavy statements. And coming from a man who had been in that very constituency, I think it is something that we shouldn't treat with levity. T.Y. Danjuma, other than being from that same constituency that he gave knocks to, is someone who is also vast in knowledge of the military, because as far as the military is concerned, he has seen it all. And you know, he actually saw it when the military was still military. Now you see what happens these days. I used to tell a lot of people that many people that we have probably in the army today are people who, given a different scenario, would not or may not have been in the army. A lot of people who I feel are in the army today didn't join the army because of the love for the job or because of the commitment to the assignments. Perhaps they joined because, you know, it's a place that you can go and then you get something to do for lack of job and employment. But during the days of General T.Y. Danjuma, people enlisted in the army because they wanted to defend the integrity of the nation, because of the love of the job. And for such a man to come out to begin to say, look, I am from this constituency, and I am telling you in his language, they collude, they collude, they collude. He used that word up to 3-4 times on that podium. It's not something that we should treat with levity. He's someone who should know exactly. And you know, men of this stature have some information that will be available to them that may not be readily available to you and I. The same thing too with the governor. The governor as the chief security officer, any governor that is worth his salt must have means and methods of ways of getting information, security information, and timely one at that. So when Governor Darius also made statements credited to him that was casting aspersion on the military, I think he too was also speaking from the position of the no. I always have this idea, maybe I've watched too many movies about the military. Militaries don't live in cities. They live in the bush. And if you're telling us that militia people will come from the bush and attack villages and go back to the bush, an army will keep doing roadblocks on the streets, I think it's a misplaced priority. You should go after the people in the bush. Army, if you are a soldier, you should live your life there. Follow them into this bush and smoke them out.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you very much, Dennis, for coming on to the program. Well, on that note, we end this week's edition of CLEARVIEW. We've been able to hear the analysis of the politician, Dennis Emmanuel, who is so vast in affairs of government, of the government house. We have been able to analyze whether governors are indeed living extravagant lifestyle as if they are emperors. He also gave us his own views on the issue of state police. And we're also able to get his views on why the constant friction among politicians, could be governor, deputy governor, or whatever. Well, until next week, when I come your way again with another guest and another topic, I am Odion Bello. Bye for now.